They fired me in front of 20 people, like it was a budget line they could delete with a keystroke. No warning, no dignity, just a public execution disguised as a restructuring. But while they were busy performing my downfall, I was already running the numbers. And the numbers were telling a very different story. Because the moment Camille announced, "Your position is eliminated effective immediately," I wasn't thinking about humiliation. I was thinking about the 12 people who would walk out after me, and the system that would collapse without us. I didn't argue. I didn't break. I just smiled. The kind of smile you give when the game has already shifted in your favor. Quiet power, delivered efficiently. That's how real revenge begins. "We're eliminating your position effective immediately," said Camille, loud enough for the entire conference room to hear. She didn't flinch, didn't even look at me. Just read the line like a bad actor in a layoff drama. "Budget cuts," she added, as if that explained everything. The words didn't sting. They punched 20 pairs of eyes shot toward me, stunned but grateful. That sick kind of gratitude people feel when the guillotine swings your way, not theirs. The air shifted. It felt colder, heavier. I saw Micah recline back in his chair, the faintest smirk twitching at the edge of his lips. Of course he knew this wasn't a shock to him. It was a script, one he probably helped write. But here's the thing, I didn't flinch either. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that follows prolonged silence, the silence of being sidelined, dismissed, and robbed of credit for 2 straight years. 2 years of Micah hijacking my work, pitching my strategies as if they were his brainstorms. 2 years of being painted as difficult whenever I dared. Question why our numbers always matched projections, even when the floor beneath us was cracking. I stood, slow, steady, smoothed my blazer like armor, locked eyes with Micah, and said what he didn't expect. Actually, perfect timing. I wish you all the best. The flicker of confusion across his face? Almost worth it. Almost. I didn't scream, didn't slam doors. I walked straight to my car, where I gave myself exactly 3 minutes, not to sob, but to burn. That cold, white-hot rage, the kind that turns grief into fuel. I stared at my dashboard, the engine humming softly. But in my head, all I could see was a flicker of red. Not rage, data. Red cells on a spreadsheet. Those quiet betrayals that numbers whisper when no one's paying attention. That flicker had haunted me for months. Tiny anomalies in quarterly reports, inconsistencies no one wanted to explain. They'd told me to stop overanalyzing, but I wasn't overanalyzing. I was listening to what the numbers were trying to say. The flicker of red. That's where the truth always lived. Because the scene that kept looping in my mind wasn't Camille's weak announcement. It was 6 months earlier. Micah, smug behind his desk, telling me, "Leadership doesn't think you're quite there yet. Maybe try being a bit more agreeable." Translation: stop asking why our quarterly reports looked photoshopped by a magician. He'd said I was overreacting, that some people weren't meant for big-picture thinking. And the next morning, my access to strategy meetings mysteriously vanished. The message couldn't have been clearer. Sit quietly or get pushed out. What they didn't know? 3 months ago, a different conversation had started. One I kept very quiet. The Industry Futures Council had reached out. Not because of what Micah had presented to the board, but because of what I had dared to question in public forums, at conferences, in the shadows of their polished numbers. They weren't watching the sanitized version of me. They were watching the truth. The real job offer came long before the pink slip. Only one of them knew it. They thought they'd written my ending. What they didn't realize, I was already on to my next chapter. The version Micah pitched to the execs was shiny and safe, stripped of risk, rinsed of truth. But behind the scenes, the Industry Futures Council had seen through the gloss. They'd followed the threads I left behind, my questions, my conference talks, the way I challenged norms like they were brittle bones. Their offer was simple: lead the initiative to build what the industry desperately needed. My one condition: I choose my crew. No filters, no approvals, just trust. As I pulled out of the company lot for the last time, my phone buzzed. A text from Elise, the council's chair. Heard what happened. Ready to build your dream team? I stared at the screen for a moment, letting the finality settle in. I had nothing left to prove, but I had everything to build. I typed one word back: absolutely. That weekend, while the office gossiped and HR spun their narrative, I got to work. 12 calls, each one deliberate, not desperate, strategic. And hey, if you've made it this far, this story's just heating up. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Especially if you've ever been underestimated, I read them all. Now let's rewind. Before the chaos, before the walkout, I was Talia Vance, Associate Director of Strategic Analysis at one of the largest firms in our sector. My job: see patterns no one else saw, think 3 steps ahead, even when it scared people. Management called it lacking team spirit. What they meant was, she asks too many inconvenient questions. Like why the financial forecasts always hit the bullseye, even when the market was a hurricane. During lunch breaks, while others scrolled or vented, I sketched. Little systems on napkins, feedback loops, heat maps, anomaly trackers. Tools not just to manage data, but to make the truth visible. It wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about proving the truth had shape. Even back then, I didn't just want to call out the cracks, I wanted to build something stronger. Like why "that's just how we do it" was treated like gospel. I never bought into corporate fairy tales. Maybe it was because I grew up wedged between 6 siblings, forgotten if I didn't speak up. Or maybe it was my father, a math professor, who taught me numbers always tell the truth. People just don't like what they say. Or my mother, a trial lawyer, who taught me to keep standing, even when the room wanted me to shrink. Qualities like that? Micah didn't value them. Saturday morning, I started with Noelle from Analytics. A genius with data visuals, overlooked twice for promotion, even though her tools had cut our department's workload nearly in half. "I'm not calling about what happened yesterday," I told her when she picked up. She sighed. "Talia, everyone knows. It was brutal." "That's done. What matters now is what's next. I'm building something new. And I need people who see the story the numbers are trying to tell." There was silence, that kind where possibility hangs thick in the air. They didn't follow me because I asked. They followed because they'd been waiting for someone to finally ask the right thing. This wasn't a rebellion. It was a rescue mission. For people, for principles, for the truth buried beneath performance metrics and corporate theater. "What exactly are you building, Talia?" Noelle asked, her voice cautious but curious. I laid it out, every piece. The council's mandate to upend the system, to replace smoke and mirrors with measurable, irrefutable value. No more bending the numbers until they cried. No more filtering truth through a PR lens. "This isn't about revenge," I said, but I knew. Some small part of it was. "What's the compensation?" That was always Noelle. Sharp, straight to the point. When I told her the number, nearly double what she was making, she let out a short laugh. When do I start? That call lit the match. I spent the rest of the weekend dialing names I'd collected like precious stones over the years. Ravi, whose diversity program was shelved under the excuse of timing. Lena, whose experimental client strategy was dismissed before it had a chance. Jonah, who dared to question our impossible growth targets and got boxed out of senior meetings for a year. I didn't bring up my firing, I didn't have to. I simply laid out the vision, real recognition, real compensation, and real authority. Micah once asked during a leadership assessment, "Why would anyone follow you?" He was about to get his answer. By Sunday night, every single person I called had said yes. 12 voices once muted by red tape and internal politics, now speaking with one shared purpose. Talent that had been buried was now standing up to be counted. And if you've ever wondered what quiet revenge looks like, it sounds like the ding of 12 resignation emails hitting an inbox all at once. Monday morning, Micah walked into a graveyard of empty desks, 12 out-of-office replies, 12 loyal soldiers gone without a sound. By Wednesday, he cracked. "What the hell did you do?" he barked when I finally answered his call. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to." "I did what you trained me to do," I said. "I identified talent, I recognized value, and I moved fast. You can't just... Goodbye, Micah, and good luck with your restructuring." We rented a converted warehouse downtown, sunlight, exposed brick, windows that stretched skyward, like ambition finally unleashed, the kind of space that made you breathe a little deeper. I looked at the team as they gathered around the giant oak table in the center. "Welcome to day one," I told them. "We've got 6 months to reimagine an industry." Noelle raised her hand, half serious. "What if we fail?" She voiced what everyone was afraid to say. We'd walked away from stability, from titles, from the illusion of safety. "Then we fail doing something honest," I said, "but I don't think we will." What followed was chaos, the best kind, arguments that led to breakthroughs, late nights filled with diagrams, coffee, and wild ideas. No more, "That's not how we do things." No more politics wrapped in protocol. Meanwhile, back at our former company, the unraveling had begun. Clients started asking uncomfortable questions. Familiar faces had vanished, deliverables slipped. Micah pushed out a perky memo, some nonsense about fresh transitions and exciting internal shifts. But memos can't fudge numbers without Noelle's analytics. They can't smooth client fires without Jonah's precision or plan for growth without Lena's backbone. With the miracle workers gone, the curtain dropped. For the first time in 5 years, the numbers told the truth. And it wasn't pretty. When the truth finally surfaced, it didn't shout. It whispered, through numbers, headlines, and a stock chart that dropped like a stone. For the first time in half a decade, the mask cracked, and the world saw what we'd always known. The system had been smoke and mirrors all along. That quarter, for the first time in 5 years, the numbers didn't bend to expectation. They told the truth. And the truth was ugly. The business press caught the scent first. Unexpected shortfall raises concerns over historical reporting accuracy, one headline read. Another was blunter, too perfect until it wasn't. Their stock plummeted 11% in a single day. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I barely noticed. Because while they were bracing for impact, we were already building the future. Our team found its rhythm. Noelle turned massive data sets into visual poetry, charts that made complex truths sing. Jonah connected with forward-thinking clients who weren't afraid to do things differently. Lena crafted growth strategies that made sense and left space for failure. And Ravi, steady and intentional, ensured our culture stayed human, diverse, respectful, whole. We weren't just coworkers, we became something rarer, a team that cared deeply and pushed each other harder. We debated, we disagreed. We danced it out at midnight with bad playlists and cold coffee. It was messy, it was exhilarating, it was ours. 3 months in, we hit a wall, and then broke through it. "It's not just the reports," Noelle said, during one of our late-night meetings. She pulled up a heat map of industry trends. Everyone's following the same flawed model. They're not just missing data, they're hiding failure. That was the click, the shift. "We don't need prettier reports," I said slowly. "We need a whole new way of measuring value." "Based on what actually works," Lena added, nodding. "Not what looks good in a boardroom." That night, we didn't go home. We stayed. We worked until sunrise, sketching what would become our defining innovation, the transparency matrix, a framework that prioritized real impact over padded projections, one that refused to hide behind jargon or jargon's favorite disguise. Data without context. Word got out, quiet at first, then louder. Former colleagues started reaching out, asking if we were hiring. Executives who once wouldn't make eye contact were now sending LinkedIn requests with cheerful emojis. Then came the email, Jordan, the CEO I'd worked under for 4 years without a single direct meeting. "Your work sounds intriguing. Let's explore potential synergies over lunch." I showed the message to the team during morning check-in. "Are you actually going to meet with him?" Ravi asked, raising an eyebrow. I glanced around the table. "What do you all think?" Lena was the first to speak. "The man ignored you for years, then made sure you were humiliated on your way out. Now he wants your brain." "Classic Jordan," Jonah muttered. "Or he's finally realizing the ship's sinking," Noelle added, "and he's hoping your lifeboat has room." Their last earnings call had been a disaster. Investors weren't buying the story anymore. "I'll meet him," I said, "not to partner, to understand." The following Tuesday, I sat across from Jordan at a polished little bistro downtown. His suit was crisp, his salad, $20, his demeanor calculated. "You've caused quite the stir," he said after the server left. 12 departures in a day, never seen anything like it." 13, I corrected calmly. "You fired me first, remember?" His expression twitched, embarrassed maybe, but not apologetic. "Well, Brock may have overstepped," he said, swirling his water. "We were restructuring." "Right, and the decision to publicly dismiss me, was that Brock's alone?" He hesitated. "Not exactly, there were concerns." "My questions about the numbers?" I asked. His eyes flickered. So he had known. "I was never opposed to rigor," he said, leaning back. "But business has realities. Sometimes you need a little flexibility." Flexibility, that word again. The corporate code for creative accounting. When a man like Jordan says flexibility, what he means is, don't look too closely at the numbers. But I'd spent my career looking exactly where they didn't want me to. That wasn't an accident, that was the point. "Flexibility," I repeated, letting the word settle between us like a cracked pane of glass. "Is that what we're calling fraud now?" Jordan lowered his voice, the way powerful men do when they want their threats to sound polite. That's a serious accusation, Talia. It's not an accusation, I said, setting my fork down gently. It's an observation. The moment hung there, heavy and unblinking. He straightened his cuffs. Let's talk about your transparency matrix. I've heard good things. Maybe there's a way our organizations can collaborate. And there it was, the real reason for this carefully orchestrated lunch. His company was spiraling, the false forecasts and creative accounting finally choking themselves. He didn't need a conversation, he needed a lifeline. We're not interested in collaboration, I said evenly. Don't be hasty, he said, leaning in, eyes sharpening. We have resources, client relationships, infrastructure. And a culture that pushes people to manipulate data, I finished for him. No thank you. He paused, watching me closely now. Be reasonable, he said finally. This industry isn't big enough for both of us to succeed. That shift in his voice, it wasn't desperation anymore. It was warning, cold and calculated. Are you threatening me, Jordan? He leaned back with a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just pointing out market realities. Startups hit roadblocks all the time. It's funny how threats often come dressed as advice. I left the bistro unsettled, adrenaline coiled tight beneath my ribs. As soon as I was alone, I called Elise. He just threatened us, I said, laying out the entire conversation. Not surprised, she replied. Your former company still has board ties across the sector. They're not above sabotage. What kind of sabotage are we talking about? There's word they've been approaching your potential clients, offering massive discounts in exchange for exclusivity. My stomach nodded. Can they do that? They can try. How's the matrix coming? We're close, but we need another month to finalize the full model. You might not have a month, Elise warned. There's a major summit in Denver next week. Every key player will be there. If you can show even a working prototype. I stopped mid-step. Next week? That's impossible. Not for your team, she said, then added almost casually, Jordan's presenting too. His topic, Innovations in Transparency. The blade twisted. He wasn't just trying to block us, he was planning to steal the launch. I raced back to our office and called an emergency meeting. We need a live demo in 6 days, I said, not sugarcoating anything. He's moving to undercut us. We have to beat him to it. The room went still. No buzz, no questions, just processing. That's not possible, Lena said finally, not with our current scope. I nodded. What if we narrow it? Focus on just one vertical, something clean and fast. Noelle was already typing. Healthcare, she murmured. Public datasets, less red tape, it's doable. Ravi crossed his arms. Even then, it's a stretch. We'd have to live here for the next 6 days. I looked around the room, their tired eyes, their loyal faces. If anyone doesn't want to take this on, speak now, no judgment. Jonah stood. They tried to erase us. Let's show them we're still here. Lena's lips curved into a smile. 6 impossible days it is. We turned our warehouse into a war room. Couches became crash zones. Fridge stocked with meal bars and caffeine. Partners dropped off hot meals, fresh clothes. The rest of the world disappeared. By day 3, exhaustion clawed at us. At 2 a.m., Noelle slammed her laptop shut. This isn't working. The model keeps failing. The variables won't stabilize. Every revolution hits a wall. Ours came at 2 a.m. on day 3, under the weight of broken code and burning eyes. When belief falters, it's never loud. It's quiet, and it creeps in sideways. from people who've carried too much for too long. I rubbed my eyes, the edges of the screen blurring as the numbers stopped making sense. The algorithm was breaking under its own complexity, and we were breaking right along with it. There has to be a solution, I said out loud, more to myself than anyone. Maybe there isn't, Noelle whispered. She rarely raised her voice, but this was worse. It was resignation. Maybe Jordan was right, she added. Maybe we bit off more than we can deliver. The room fell into an eerie hush. In our office, Jordan had become shorthand for everything we were fighting against. To hear his name spoken like that, it stung. And then Lena spoke. She'd been quiet for hours, curled at the corner desk, scribbling lines of code on paper like she was solving a riddle instead of an equation. "What if we're building this backward?" she said softly. I looked up. "Explain." "We've been trying to make the system solve for everything at once, but what if we broke it down, used cascading validations instead? Step-by-step logic, one layer at a time." Jonah leaned in. "Process each block before the next kicks in. Clean, linear." Lena was already at the whiteboard, drawing fast. "It would look like this." Suddenly the room shifted. Energy surged back in. Fatigue didn't vanish, it just got quieter. By dawn, we'd rebuilt the entire structure. For the next 3 days, we didn't stop. We coded, we tested, we failed and then fixed. Sleep was rationed, clarity was hoarded. The only thing keeping us upright was belief in what we were building. The night before the summit, we ran the final test. Everyone gathered around Noelle's screen. She hit execute. A 3D model unfolded before us, fluid, dynamic, alive. Healthcare outcomes plotted against cost, administration load, and patient satisfaction, all shifting in real time as we toggled each input. "It's beautiful," Ravi whispered. It was more than that. It was proof. For the first time, we'd given the industry a mirror that couldn't lie. A system that prioritized patient outcomes over optics. Transparency over performance theater. And then, as we stood there quietly taking it in, my screen blinked. An email. From Brock. "Heard you're presenting tomorrow. Bold move for someone new to leadership. Jordan's been preparing his for months. Some advice from your former manager. Know when you're outmatched." I read it aloud. Jonah let out a low laugh. "He still thinks you scare easy?" I smiled, but inside something twisted. The language was too precise, too knowing. Brock had details he shouldn't. I looked around the room. 12 people, 12 minds I'd handpicked. 12 lives I'd staked my own future on. Had I chosen wrong? A cold uncertainty settled in my stomach. Not because I believed someone had betrayed us, but because the possibility now existed. "Everything okay?" Lena asked, watching me. I forced a smile. "Just nerves. Let's all try to get some rest before the flight." But that night, rest never came. I lay awake, replaying every conversation, every shared glance. Who had a sudden influx of money? Who still talked to their old manager? Who had the most to gain by playing both sides? I found nothing, no cracks, just shadows of doubt. Still, Brock knew something he shouldn't. The next morning, the Denver Conference Center buzzed with power suits and polished shoes. Our presentation was set for 2 p.m., Jordan's 11 a.m. "We're going to his," I told the team as we checked in. "Know your enemy." We slipped into the back of the main hall just as Jordan stepped onto the stage. Jordan's slides were polished, his words practiced. But even dressed in buzzwords, imitation, can't mask ignorance. He spoke of transparency like it was a trend, not the revolution we'd carved from sleepless nights and raw data. His presentation opened with sleek visuals and designer infographics, every frame dripping with corporate gloss. The future of our industry, he announced, lies in greater transparency. My stomach clenched. Was this it? Had he stolen it? But as he continued, relief uncoiled inside me. His so-called innovation was a dashboard, a prettier, shinier version of the same broken metrics. He hadn't fixed anything. He'd just put lipstick on a ledger. He has no idea what we've built, Lena whispered beside me. After his applause faded, we ducked into a quiet prep room to regroup. The energy had shifted, lighter but tense. There was still something I couldn't shake. I closed the door behind us. We need to talk, I said. The room stilled. Brock's email, he knew too much. Has anyone been in contact with anyone from our old company? The question dropped like a stone. Eyes widened, bodies shifted. You think one of us leaked something? Jonah asked, disbelief lining every word. I think someone might have, I said carefully. Not maliciously, maybe unintentionally. Ravi stood up, arms crossed. That's absurd. We've all walked away from everything for this. I know how it sounds, but Brock knew. Either he's bluffing, or someone gave him a glimpse. Noelle interjected, firm. That's what he does, sows doubt, fractures trust. I wanted to agree, but instinct said otherwise. If there's anything to share, now's the time. Silence. Then Lena spoke up. I had lunch with Jade last week. Jade, her closest friend from the old office. But I swear, she said quickly, I didn't share anything specific. I told her we were presenting, that we'd had a breakthrough, that's it. What did she say? I asked. She was curious, supportive. I didn't sense anything off. I studied her face. Nervous, yes, but not deceitful. Anyone else? Yuri lifted a hand hesitantly. My brother-in-law still works there. We had dinner on Sunday. I may have mentioned the healthcare prototype. Another thread, thin but real. Then Noelle shifted in her seat. My pulse spiked. She'd been my first call, my first yes. Jordan reached out to me, she said, offered 3 times my current salary to come back. The air froze. He said things were changing, that they needed people like me again. I swallowed hard. And? I told him exactly where he could shove his offer, she said, eyes sharp. But I wanted you to know he tried. Relief hit me like wind after drowning, followed by guilt. I'm sorry for doubting anyone, I said. I had to ask. Aaron leaned forward. You don't need to apologize, and you're not wrong to be cautious. But Brock's email? That was desperation, not intelligence he's rattled. I exhaled slowly. You're right, I said. Let's shift focus. The moment passed, but it left something behind. Not doubt, not division, a deeper bond, the kind forged in fire. The knock came just as we were setting up for the biggest moment of our careers. It sounded ordinary. It wasn't. Every betrayal I'd ever survived started the same way, with a polite request that led me somewhere I shouldn't have gone. We were organizing our slides, tightening transitions, rehearsing the timing one last time when the knock came. A young staff member poked her head in. Ms. Vance, there's a technical issue with the presentation hall. They need you to check something. I followed her through the maze of service corridors, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, my heels echoing against tile. What kind of issue? I asked as we turned another corner. I'll let him explain, she said, holding open a door. Inside, sitting alone at a small table, was Jordan. Thank you, Claire, he said smoothly. She nodded once and slipped out, shutting the door behind her. What is this? I demanded. A private conversation, he said, gesturing toward the empty chair across from him. I'll stand. He smiled like someone who enjoyed having the upper hand. Your presentation's in an hour, that's why this couldn't wait. He slid a folder across the table. Take a look. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside were printouts, fragments of our transparency framework, annotated with internal notes that only my team could have written. Cold spread through me. How did you get these? Jordan leaned back, eyes calm, calculating. Does it matter? What matters is that your so-called innovation uses proprietary algorithms developed under my company. That's a lie, I said, but my pulse was pounding. The code looked familiar, eerily so, just off enough to make my head spin. Our legal team disagrees. He pushed another document toward me. A cease and desist. If you present today, we'll file suit by morning. I skimmed the papers, anger rising with every word. These algorithms weren't developed at your company. They're ours, brand new. He gave a shrug. Courts can sort that out, but lawsuits are expensive. Investors panic easily. You don't want to spend your first year fighting legal ghosts, do you? He wasn't wrong. Even a false claim could stall funding and kill momentum. What do you want, Jordan? His lips curved. Partnership. Bring your team under our umbrella as an innovation division. You get resources, we get your matrix, everyone wins. Except we'd be right back under your control, I said flatly. Consider the alternative, he replied, voice soft but sharp. Years in litigation, a fractured team, all because you wouldn't compromise. I looked back at the code fragments, the structure, the logic, and then it hit me why it all seemed so familiar. These aren't from our prototype, I said slowly. They're from old projects, ones your company shelved years ago. A small twitch in his jaw betrayed him. The concepts are similar enough to cause legal ambiguity, he countered. No, they're not, I said, voice steady now. And you know it. That's why you're trying to intimidate me instead of filing. I gathered the papers, stacked them neatly, and slid them back across the table. We're presenting today. File your lawsuit if you must. I turned toward the door. Before you go, Jordan said, his tone shifting, there's one thing you should know. I paused, hand on the knob. Brock didn't act alone when he fired you. The words landed like a cold slap. Meaning? I gave the order, he said simply. Your questions were getting too close to things that couldn't become public. For a moment, I just stared at him. The confirmation didn't shock me. It solidified everything I'd always known. He hadn't just taken my job. He'd tried to bury the truth. And now I was about to drag it into the light. It was never about budgets. It was always about silence. And I had finally heard that truth from the source. Jordan had admitted what I always knew. I wasn't fired for failing. I was fired for refusing to play dumb. Thank you for your honesty, I told him, my voice calm. You just made what comes next much easier. I returned to our prep room, heart pounding but mind clear. The team looked up, sensing the shift before I even spoke. Change of plans, I said. We're adjusting the presentation. Whitney blinked. What happened? I told them everything. The ambush, the forged claims, the bluff dressed up in legalese. Their reactions rippled, first alarm, then fire. "He's bluffing," Noelle said immediately, scrolling through our original code. "What he showed you, that's old dev data, stuff we built under their roof but never finished." "Which means," Yuri added, "he doesn't actually know what we've done here." "Exactly. But," I said, moving toward the whiteboard, "he gave us something valuable, an opening." The room leaned in. "What if," I continued, "we didn't just showcase how the Matrix improves healthcare transparency, but revealed how it can expose financial manipulation?" Ravi's eyes lit up. "Using their numbers?" Whitney looked up from her laptop. "Do we have time to rebuild the demo?" "If everyone helps," Noelle said, already coding. "Yes." And so we did. For the next 40 minutes, the room became a hive of movement, voices, and keystrokes. We pulled public data, polished visuals, adjusted narrative flow. It wasn't perfect, but it was sharp, precise, undeniable. At exactly 2 p.m., I stepped onto the stage. The room was packed. Industry executives, investors, journalists, and front and center, Jordan and Brock, side by side like they still believed they owned the floor. "Today," I began, "we're going to show you something that changes everything." The first half of our demo unfolded with practiced grace, our healthcare model drawing nods and quiet murmurs. The framework revealed real-time outcomes, streamlined costs, and patient-centered metrics. It was elegant and efficient. Then I pivoted. "But healthcare isn't the only space in crisis," I said, letting the weight of my words land. "Opaque financial practices affect every sector." "Let's take a look." Jordan stiffened. Our visualization shifted to 5 years of public financials from his company. "Notice the patterns," I said, highlighting data points. "Repeated consistencies, adjustments made just before fiscal close, metrics that defy probability." The audience leaned forward. The screen pulsed with red. We didn't name names. We didn't have to. The Matrix spoke in proof, not accusation. By the time we wrapped, the room erupted. Thunderous applause. Cameras flashing, executives on their feet. And I looked right at Jordan. I met Jordan's gaze as the applause echoed around us. "Transparency isn't just a buzzword," I said. "It's the future. Those who embrace it will thrive. Those who don't." I let the silence finish the sentence for me. The aftermath didn't wait. That evening, 3 of the industry's biggest clients asked to implement our framework. A venture firm requested an exclusive sit-down. Journalists hovered like bees, notebooks ready. Jordan and Brock slipped out without a word. No spin, no press release, just exit. 2 weeks later, the board announced a leadership transition. Jordan stepped down as CEO. Brock, they said, was pursuing other opportunities. An internal audit began the next day. We didn't gloat. We didn't post victory selfies. We got back to work. 6 months after the Denver summit, our framework, the Matrix, had been adopted across nearly a third of the industry. Our team had grown to 40, every one of them handpicked for their integrity, not just their resumes. But the most surreal moment? Brock applied for a job. His cover letter bragged about developing and mentoring top talent. I didn't reject him outright. Instead, I handed his application to Lena, Yuri, Noelle, and Jonah, the very people he'd once belittled, overlooked, and boxed out of meetings. They interviewed him, respectfully, thoroughly, and then they declined, writing, "We're looking for someone who lifts others up, not someone who stands on their backs." I didn't need to say, "I told you so." The work did that for me. Because sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't fire and fury, it's quiet, measured success. The applause had barely faded when my phone buzzed again. I glanced down at the screen and froze. A terse notification from the Financial Industry Standards Commission. Please contact us regarding your organization's data framework. My team gathered to watch. It was just 3 words. Urgent inquiry initiated. I looked around the room, saw Noelle's eyes widen, Ravi's fists clench. In that instant, I understood. The mirror we'd held up to the industry was starting to reflect back on us too. We'd cracked open something bigger than one company, and now the regulators were coming. We thought we were building the future. What we didn't expect was to become the new frontier. That night, we knew one thing for sure. The world had noticed. And when you're the one holding the mirror, don't be surprised when powerful people try to break it. If this story moved you, like and subscribe. I've got more stories to tell, stories of quiet power, unexpected turnarounds, and the people who refuse to stay silent. Because this was just the beginning.